Greetings, travelers. Last time I made one of these, there was a small outcry for me to talk about Stormblood sooner rather than later. Now, it's not as if I dislike making these videos. They just take a ton of time to plan, thanks to a buttload of rewatching cutscenes while managing cursed energy. So I'll get this out of the way up front. If you want to help me out, you can always like the videos, comment on them, and create multiple alternate accounts to help boost my sub numbers. It also goes without saying, this video will contain massive story spoilers. And with that out of the way, on to the official intro. Stormblood is an expansion that is controversial at best. Now, you can't fault Stormblood too much. It comes off the back of Heavensward, which is a great narrative overall that most of the player base thoroughly enjoys. And now in retrospect, it is sandwiched between that and Shadowbringers, only further making its flaws ever more apparent. Despite this, I don't think Stormblood is all terrible, but I do think it is a noticeable downgrade from the other expansions in terms of plot. So if you do need a recap up until this point, you can always watch the first two videos of this series. But really, since Heavensward is very self-contained in terms of story, the only thing relevant to Stormblood is that Ishgard, the fourth city-state of Eorzea, has come to peace with its 1,000-year war and has joined the rest of the city-states in an alliance to aggressively defend themselves from the Garlean Empire. Okay, that's not the only thing that's important. There's also the fact that after defeating Nidhogg, the angry dragon, we threw his eyes, the source of his power, into the abyss, which is going to be important sooner rather than later. So with that, after the true end of Heavensward, we are now in the two pre-patches of Stormblood. With Nidhogg's defeat, we now get invited to dinner with this handsome man, and decline an alcoholic beverage as we are still recovering from the food poisoning experienced earlier. Remember those Shadowbringer characters that we met for 2 seconds? Well, they're back, and they severely injured Alize off screen. Now, if you didn't do the Binding Coil of Bahamut's raid story, then you're probably wondering who the hell she is. She is Alphino's sister. She was busy being a lone wolf, but not anymore. Anyways, you heal her and find out that the Warriors of Darkness are trying to kill another primal, which they probably were told to do by Hydaelyn. You know, Hydaelyn didn't really seem to care much about primals until Minfilia became her. Probably unrelated. So you go and stop a primal summoning, which you actually succeed at. And I swear, this is the only time that this happens in the plot, where you actually stop a primal from being summoned. The Warriors of Dankness show up and explain that they were heroes in their own world, known as the First, and they upset the balance and their whole world was destroyed. Thus, they figured that the Ashians, who they fought against, were trustworthy, and were told that by destroying your world, it will save theirs. Yeah, I'm totally convinced the Ashians have your best interest at heart. Well, time to put all of that on the side. You figure that another primal is going to be summoned, and you start sweating as it's the kobolds again. And at this point, you are just begging for them not to fight Titan for a third fucking time in the main story. Just please stop. A piece of level 50 content for a level 60 quest, huh? Nice. Yay, we win! This friendly kobold has now given into the primal's influence and is promptly adopted by Alize. Well, we just killed a level 50 primal, so what do we do next? Return to the Waking Sands? Actually, no, we just move on. At some point, Udiandra gives a plot drop that the rejoining of two versions of the universe is something that can be done. Alize wonders why Udiandra seems to be so up to speed on all of this. Well, anyways, we journey to Little Alamigo, where we learn of a masked man called the Griffin, who is recruiting people to fight against the Garleans. Also, Ida and Papalimo are here. Hey, wait a minute, where were you two? Here the entire time? Didn't even bother to write, huh? The Scions are suspicious that the Griffin is trying to summon a primal to fight Garlemald, and when you confront the man about this, he says, No, we simply gave all those crystals to a beast tribe to help us fight. Yeah, buddy, that just sounds like summoning a primal with extra steps. Anyways, this Griffin, who is not the real Griffin, specifically thanks you, the Warrior of Light, for helping him out, which seems important, but it's too late to think about that. We gotta stop another primal. Oh, thanks for taking care of that one for us Warriors of Darkness, and now we're fighting. Udiandra was actually a double agent who was on your side the entire time. Alize uses the Spirit Bomb and you win the fight, only to find out that the Warriors of Darkness have the dragon heritage. Or is it returned by death? They don't die when they are killed. Fuck. It is revealed this whole plot point of Minfilia joining with Hydaelyn was all in an attempt to save the First, which didn't really go very well. Also, you get a fancy wand that she hopes you don't have to use. Man, they really had to foreshadow all of this, huh? Well, this stuff about the Warriors of Darkness all takes a back seat until Shadowbringers. They just kind of leave with the Minfilia Hydaelyn Crystal Lady hybrid. Alright, to speed this part up, a cat girl named Manago shows up to let you know that the Griffin intends to start a war. He wants to do this by instigating a battle on Baelsar's wall. The city-states are surprisingly willing to fight. You beat him up only to realize that he was Ilberd the entire time. So to summarize, Ilberd and Rauban are both citizens from a place in Gyr Abania that I don't bother to know the exact name of. They were forced out of their homeland when the Fire Nation attacked, and both were excellent warriors. Both desired to free their homeland, but sought different means. Rauban wants to climb up the ranks of leadership and fight legitimately, while Ilberd believes that the ends justify the means, meaning everything he did, from betraying the Scions to taking a bunch of money from a syndicate member, and even instigating this fight, are all just part of his real plan, using the eyes of Nidhogg and the anger of every rebel nearby to summon a really big primal, which is exactly what he does. I wonder where he got those eyes from. So Papalymo uses some forbidden magic to seal the primal and dies. Man, this is still technically the Heavensward expansion, and I really gotta say, that's a pretty solid kill count. Well, the primal is sealed, but only temporarily, so you need to find a weapon to surpass Metal Gear, and you consult the man who knows the most about Allagan technology, Nero. And Sid too, I guess. Well, Omega and the primal fight and then promptly disappear into the sunset, thus solving the problem once and for all. Finally, Ida becomes depressed and reveals that she's actually Lys, Ida's sister. And all the Scions say that they already knew that, and that you, the player, were the only one not in the loop, making you truly feel like Polnareff from Stardust Crusaders. And so you repelled the Empire from the wall, and now the city-states agree it's time for war, so welcome to the actual start of Stormblood. With the wall defeated, it's time to attempt to repel the Empire from the remainder of Gyr Abania. While the military is planning this, being mostly led by Rauban, Lys decides that maybe finding the Resistance headquarters would make the most sense. Upon arriving in said secret base, they kindly mention without being prompted that, man, it would be a real shame if the Empire found out that we were here and we all died, which is not even really foreshadowing and more like outright telling you what's going to happen ahead of time. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. They agree to help, although the rebels are split into many factions and are extremely disorganized, meaning that while they agree to help you, they can't speak for every resistance group. This default Warrior of Light model says that we should go fight the rest of the Empire right now, and everyone just collectively says no. Keep in mind that Manago here is the second in command of the resistance force. To demonstrate that the Empire is not happy with the loss of the wall, they send a group of Australopithecus to fight them, and they lose. Who would have guessed? This guy, who is apparently from a realm reborn, as if I give a shit, lets you cheat your way through the legends of the Hidden Temple as you go to the peaks. In case you forgot that the Empire is not very nice, they have a scene where some Alamegans, who have joined the Empire, viciously beat an innocent civilian. Lys tries to help, but is reminded that the Empire is always looking for an excuse to kill everyone in Gyr Abania, so let's not help right now. The real purpose of this scene is so that you can see this lady demonstrating her survival instinct of joining what appears to be the winning side rather than the rebels in an act of self-preservation. This evil Alamegan group is called the Skulls. So you do some spying with Pippin when a giant fire starts coming up from Rauger's Reach. Wow, is it that time already? Well, look who it is. You see this dude, Xenos? You're gonna fight this guy at least a few times and watch him cast Concavity and instantly lose the fight. Get used to it, because that's every Xenos fight ever. So a bunch of people die, but you manage to save some others, including Conrad, because he is an important character. Now after this defeat, everyone has the smart idea. If we start a second war with Garlic in the east, maybe it will be spread so thin that it loses all of its flavor and we can defeat them. Now on paper, this isn't necessarily a bad idea. Fighting a war on two fronts is generally not easy, but what this means in terms of the story is quite literally fucking off from Gyr Abania until you go help a rebellion in the east. While boarding the pirate ship to get to said east, Alize is reminded of her job. The boat is stuck at sea, and you and your friends fight some spooky ghosts. You eventually make it to Kugane, and finally meet with a man named Hancock, who works for an evil syndicate member in Ul'dah. His presence makes the entire crew very uncomfortable, and his jokes do not land well. Anyways, it's time to look for the whereabouts of Gosetsu and Yugiri. Yeah, I haven't mentioned S-tier husbando Gosetsu yet, but he managed to row a boat all the way to Eorzea to say hello to Yugiri and tell her that it's time to free their homeland. So the reason why you want to find them is that they probably know where the group of people who don't like the taste of garlic are in the east. This cold-blooded animal tries to lead you into a trap. You are saved by a ninja turtle after a great stealth mission. He helps you because he knows you're friends with the man with the money, and this ninja turtle also wants to make some money. So I guess capitalism actually helped us for once in the plot. You violently extort some information out of the thing that led you into a trap, and find out that Gosetsu was arrested in Kugane. You then see him being so cool that the police decide to let him go. Now it's time to get past the Ruby Sea. It is called this because it's red with the blood of tanks who forgot to mitigate. It's actually called this because it glows red in the morning sun. Gosetsu reveals that him and Yugiri are currently taking a break in their relationship so they can more easily cover ground and find Lord Hien, the heir to the throne of their nation that currently doesn't exist. While attempting to cross the Ruby Sea, you find out that the Empire is not being extorted by the pirates because they are ready to crush them at a moment's notice. In other words, Empire, bad. You catch wind of a high-ranking Garlean official being in town, and that's when you first meet Yotsuyu. She shoots a villager who refused to kill his own parents. Nice. Also, that one dude that we fought in Gyr Abania is also here for some reason. Gosetsu intervenes in the madness and gets arrested, so you find help in the form of some pirates. They agree to help, kind of. Anyways, where do the good Ninja Turtles live? Okay, the real reason why you go there is to help with negotiations between the pirates and the good Kojin, because the red turtles are helping the Empire, so they need the blue turtles to try and even the fight. Okay, there are a few other reasons for being here, but most importantly, it's so that you can learn how to breathe underwater. And that Yugiri's parents live in this village and she left to go help Doma, but her parents are happy to know that Yugiri is healthy as far as you can tell. While you are doing all of this, Yotsuyu is busy torturing people. So, we have a good and a bad beast tribe. You'll never believe what happens next. That's right, it's time to summon a primal. Although it wasn't really the intention of the bad beast tribe, it just kind of happens. This is because you were trying to threaten their treasure trove to distract them, but that treasure turned into a primal. So you defeat the big primal, where I was the off tank and I forgot to tank the orbs for my team, who was not too happy when we wiped. Literally harder than Savage. You win and all the evil beast tribe members flee, realizing that you are the real deal. Nah, just kidding. Alize actually murders every last remaining soul as they try to stop you. So you get to the village and save Gosetsu, who was actually already saved by the pirates, thanks to you stopping the reinforcements of the red Kojin. While I'm on the topic, how come the red Kojin are actually red and the blue Kojin are green? Is this like the Pokemon red and green bullshit? Anyways, you get the Empire away from the Ruby Sea. For now. Welcome to my favorite place, Yenchia, or as I like to call it, essentially, Zenos came to Doma, obliterated it, and left Yotsuyu in charge, who is currently inflicting as much psychological damage as possible, making it very hard to not go insane while encountering a monster in this game of Arkham Horror. You find a small farming village that is collectively just hoping that the Empire casually forgets that they exist. They'd rather not have the rebels with them because it will only draw more attention and cause them more pain. So you ignore them and go to the HQ of the rebels, which happens to be right next door to the place that doesn't want to have rebels nearby. Well, Yugiri finally shows up, and she says that she found the other samurai master, who is the heir to the throne. You unfortunately discover that the Empire is taking villagers away to a labor camp. You follow them and activate FPS mode and use some blow darts with fast-acting instant death poison to kill the Garleans and definitely not put them to sleep in an act that I can only describe as personal. So you steal some uniforms and help the villagers escape a life of slavery. You use some medicine that makes all the soldiers forget what happened recently. This way, when they wake up, they don't want to admit that they fell asleep at their post and everyone just tries to forget this incident happened. When returning to the House of Fierce, they are panicking because Zenos is coming to the east. It is at this point in the story where you are probably wondering, if Gosetsu can paddle across the sea, Yotsuyu's servant can get here at light speed, and Zenos also apparently takes no time to get here, the Far East is starting to look a lot like the close West more than anything else at this point. Although, I will concede, the Empire probably can move faster thanks to having better technology. Anyways, Gyr decides that this is a good opportunity to try and kill the legend himself, which goes about as well as you would expect. Although you do escape with your lives, as Zeno says something to the effect of, "You're stronger than the first time we met. Maybe you'll be even cooler later, so it makes sense to keep you alive." Thanks, Zenos. Somehow, the people of Doma are inspired now that you've been defeated, which is interesting. So now it's time to find Hien. Also, Astinian shows up and is doing something cool off-screen. So, welcome to the Azim Steppe, and you give an item to a girl named Serena. She knows where the Lord is and agrees to help. It's worth mentioning that the Empire hasn't tried to mess with this area because the climate is too harsh for them. Oh, I'm totally sure they won't show up while we're here in the plot. Also, something about how these various tribes in the steppe are not exactly on great terms. Well, Hien is on a hill, and Gosetsu and Gyr say it's time to fight back, and Hien says, well, that's good. I'd rather fight back than give up before we even try. Long story short, Hien wants to recruit the help of the Mongols, but the only way to do that is to win in a tournament arc. So you ask the tribe that Serena is from if you can fight for them in their place, and they say sure, but you're going to have to pass a trial first. You complete the trial with ease. Maybe. You run around and interview various members of various social circles and conclude that the current leaders are not exactly super popular. They even asked you to pay them a tribute, which your group doesn't take very kindly to. Also, this group believes that dying in battle makes you reincarnated. Neat. They are also slowly dying out. Well, it's time for a solo instance to end them all. All you gotta do is capture the flag, and you did it. The Mongols have to listen to Serena because you won. That's neat, but wait a minute. Is that the Empire who would never step foot into this area? I swear, if the game says that something won't happen, then it will. Let me try this. A cat girl is not gonna burst through my door right now and beat the shit out of me. Damn it! Anyways, you beat up the Empire scouting force, and the Azim Steppe tribes agree to an alliance because they have no free will. Well, I guess we can return to Doma. Alphino has a plan. If we simply destroy Doma Castle, then we can easily win the battle and reclaim the land. To which some people around say, can you still be the ruler of the land without a castle? And Hien says to everybody that supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some big building that looks important. Well, between you and Doma, you have some Magitech in the way. Magitech, you say? Well, I happen to know a person that we should probably talk to then. It's Tataru. We have to get some legal documents from Tataru, but we give those documents to Sid. We end up weeding out some Imperial spies, that goes pretty okay, and the Ninja Turtles will also help us by revealing that Doma Castle is built next to a dam that they can blow up, and the villagers help by giving moral support. Well, you defeat a slasher film villain who is actually still that one guy. Hien turns into Neo from the Matrix, and Gosetsu holds up a ceiling for so long that everyone can say how cool he is before having the entire castle crush him and Yotsuyu to death. Except I didn't see any bodies or verify a pulse, so I cannot confirm if they are dead or not. With everyone free, Hien says it's time to become the leader again, and everyone lived happily ever after. The end. Oh, wait a minute. Wasn't there a second war being fought at the same time as this? You know, I completely forgot. In fact, weren't we supposed to make the Garleans fight a war on two fronts? I thought that was the plan. Well, if we aren't fighting them at the same time, isn't this just fighting two wars on one front? Whatever. It's time to leave, by first returning to Kugane. Alphino reminds us that he doesn't understand the concept of currency, which upsets Tataru. After returning to Gyr Abania, the leaders listen to your tales of liberation. You then ask them what they have been doing in your absence, and they meekly reply with, waiting for you to get back. So, everything is exactly as we left it. Cool. Conrad, after listening to how awesome you are, decides to let Lise lead the resistance. Alright, so we finally lead a fight against the Empire that would not have worked if we didn't free the Far East earlier, because as you can clearly see, the situation is exactly the fucking same. Fedora over here gets a bit upset when she has to retreat, and now we are happy that we are technically winning the war at this point. As we settle into the second half of the map, a mysterious group of beast-like individuals appear. One group is good, and the other one is bad, and if you can't figure out what's about to happen, You really haven't been paying attention to anything in the plot. Well, Frederica killed one of the Koalan, and this upsets said victim's mother, so they decide to summon a primal. This trial will leave people lost and confused as they wonder what a duty action is used for. So you beat her up and then tell the grieving mother that her child is good and dead and very much not alive. After satisfyingly rubbing more salt into that open wound, you leave, feeling proud of yourself for such a great display of diplomatic skills. Anyways, it's time to attack the next Imperial stronghold. This is going pretty well until Xenos tells Formosan to blow the whole place up and kill everyone, including her comrades. Which she does, and it's pretty great. Also, she had some freaky experiments done to her and now has some superpowers. Don't worry about it. A bunch of people die, but Conrad dies more than anyone else and makes Lise the official leader of the resistance. Lise says that she's not fit to be a leader, and despite me agreeing with that statement, she remains the leader anyways. Well, it probably makes the most sense to disable that cannon now that we know that the Empire will willingly blow away everyone, including themselves. So you do just that. After a successful turret dismantling in which Dontla escapes, Raubon notices that Lise doesn't seem confident as a leader. You don't say. Well, he shows her his hometown and talks about his past, reminding Lise that everyone that has died did so without regret, because all the rebels would rather die for freedom than live in tyranny. God bless America. But dying for a cause is almost easier in a way, because being one of the survivors means living with the guilt of being not dead. So Lise puts on a dress and gets embarrassed when you say she looks good. It is now time to discuss how we are going to free Alamigo. What I unfortunately didn't mention is that Kryl was kidnapped and is being used in a freaky research facility to create duplicate synthetic echo buffs for the Garleans, which is what Forspoken has used to gain superpowers. And before heading off to stop the evil research lab, Urianger shows up and gives you some kryptonite to stop Fandango's echo buff temporarily. And you then get to fight her and win, freeing Kryl, who is apparently completely unharmed, unlike Conrad, who is dead. Essentially, we learn that Xenos has some serious shit that he can use, but no one knows exactly what it is. Maybe it's Omega that went missing. Anyways, it's time to storm the blood and attack the Alamigan stronghold. Not before negotiating with some wolfmen by letting them know that Doma has actually been freed. If only news could travel as fast as anything else crossing the fucking ocean. Speaking of Domans, here they are. They're here to help despite not being part of the plan. You know, if we weren't going to fight a war on two fronts at the same time, maybe using a second army was a better idea. But nobody thought of that one. Oh, Hien really insisted on it, but Alphino said no. Fucking beautiful. So you finally storm Alamigo and fight Xenos. You now have enough gear to not instantly die to a raid-wide attack, and you beat him. But guess what? Xenos also has the Echo, and he uses it to pilot, you're never gonna believe it, Omega Shinryu. He has become that big primal that Papalymo died to hold in place for like 3 hours or something. So you defeat said primal, and before you get to kill Xenos yourself, he goes ahead and kills him himself, removing any sort of satisfaction of getting any revenge. So just to be clear, the reason why Xenos does all this crazy shit is just because he wanted someone to actually be a difficult fight for him, and since you did that, he died happy. Remember, Xenos is not exactly the most sane individual. With the Empire defeated, everyone liberated sings the USSR national anthem, which they don't really explain how everyone knows the lyrics. Finally, Estinian is the only person with a big enough brain to destroy Nidhogg's eyes once and for all. And that is the end of Stormblood. But it's patch time, baby. Everyone is unsure what the government of Alamigo is going to be. May I recommend an Anarcho Syndicate commune? It seems like a good idea to get some fresh air and go on a more standard adventure. So you hear about some treasure and decide to go get it. Welcome to a duty where you find treasure. Well, that's fun. Turns out the citizens of Alamigo find out that you're keeping Dontla prisoner, and they want her executed. So we talk to her in prison and find out about her past and why she doesn't really like people. Realizing that her parents made a choice that seemed the best at the time to try and live a better life, but ultimately, she blames the Alamigans for how terrible everything is for her. Then her echo kicks in and she has the epiphany that other people, specifically the Warrior of Light, also have a ton of shit to deal with in their life. Fortuna then asks, how do you do it? How do you keep going on? And Warrior of Light says, Fuck you, that's how. So cool, we leave her to suffer for eternity, being haunted by the memories of those around her, as her echo shows her the massive amount of suffering she inflicted on others. Well, it makes sense to talk to the Sultana because there are a bunch of refugees that want to return home. We have a friendly discussion with good old Lororito, who basically says that he isn't going to help people unless he gets to make some money. I told you that capitalism is always the enemy. Someone go get the guillotine. Well, you manage to convince him that it's a good investment, and move on. At some point, you find out that Alamigo captured some of the people who instigated the summoning of that giant primal, and you get to say how you want to punish them. Well, you know me. Kill all sons of bitches. Time to make some peace with the local beast tribes. You do in fact invite the evil beast tribe to a meeting where you wag your finger at them and say, now don't go summoning a primal. And guess what they do? Summon a primal. After that piece of shit solo instance, you are saved by Flamingo as she broke out of prison to save you. This is almost a redemption arc, but not really. Raubon says that his work here is done, and it's time to return to Old Ah. However, the Sultana decides to let Raubon dissolve his duties and return to his homeland of Alamigo, which is a pretty solid, heartfelt scene, to be honest, proving that she cares more about Raubon's well-being than upholding traditions. Well, back to Kugane. It turns out that Yotsuyu and Gosetsu did not get crushed or drowned, but actually survived and are now traveling together. Ah, yes, fellow travelers. Proving that if they didn't bleed out on screen, they probably aren't dead. It turns out that the Empire is trying to find Yotsuyu, who is in the Ruby Sea. You manage to find the two before the Empire can take Yotsuyu away, and now you should be aware that while Gosetsu is totally fine mentally, Yotsuyu has lost all memories and has effectively reverted into a child. Now going by the name just Suyu. With this, she has a completely different personality, and is mostly harmless while treating Gosetsu as a sort of father figure. You finally make it back to Doma, and a group of Garleans led by a dude named Asahi show up in Doma, and ask to exchange some prisoners now that this battle is currently on hold. Simple enough. He also casually mentions that he would like to have his sister, Yotsuyu, returned as well. Anyways, he figures that this is probably a setup, but he doesn't want to pass on an opportunity to save some prisoners of war if he can. Let me speed this up. Asahi does something nice. You reveal that Suyu is alive but completely useless to the Empire as she has no memory and probably couldn't leak confidential information to the Domans even if she wanted to. So he decides he doesn't want to return Yotsuyu under the condition that she remains amnesiac. Asahi says, yeah, sure, buddy. Before he leaves, he pulls you aside and says, fuck you, fuck all of you, I'm gonna kill you all, you piece of shit, which shows you that he's probably not a good guy. There is now an intermission where Suyu leaves Doma because no one knows how to keep track of prisoners, it would seem. She finds her way to the village that you remember her torturing the locals at, and they all hate her. Well, only a little girl is able to say that she seems harmless now, and regretful of decisions that she made, although she doesn't really remember. It's kind of a forgiveness arc, but not really. More or less, the villagers realize that she is not the same person that she used to be. You end up learning a lot about Yotsuyu. Abused and belittled by her adoptive family, turned into a prostitute, and generally treated like shit for her entire life. It is not a surprise that she evolved into a person who wanted nothing more than to inflict as much suffering on everyone around her, in the same way that the world treated her. And this is when it actually finally clicked for me. The reason why Yotsuyu is put in charge of Doma and the region was not because she was strong, or a good leader, simply because Zenos knew she would cause unrivaled anguish, and hopefully cause enough despair to get the people to rise up and eventually challenge him. But with all of those memories gone, she's just like anyone else. Before you can complete this whole exchange, Asahi brings Yotsuyu's parents in front of her, which causes her memories to come back. She then kills said parents, which, really feels like some solid vigilante justice, and she returns to the Empire. When you go to make the prisoner exchange, Asahi reveals he is summoning a primal, and Yotsuyu is the protein for the process, turning into Tsukuyomi. This trial involves her causing more internal suffering for herself to become a stronger primal. In her memories, though, Gosetsu is the only one who defends her, claiming that she deserves a second chance, although Yotsuyu believes herself to be irredeemable. After her defeat, she lies on the ground and Asahi comes over and she kills him, making Yotsuyu have a pretty solid killing spree, and all three of these latest deaths really feel justified, honestly. You rush to her side, only for Yotsuyu to bleed out in front of you, claiming that you should be happy now that the witch is dead. But really, you can't help but just feel sorry for her. For what it's worth, this is the best story arc of Stormblood. I don't do it justice by skipping over everything, but Yotsuyu is a good villain, because you understand her motivations, and you can see how her tragedy could have been avoided. Even as she fades, she wonders if Gosetsu likes the fruit that she picked for him, implying that despite retaining all of her memories, she still cares for the one person who showed her any love. Well, now that I'm no longer emotional, you look into Asahi's memories and find out that Zenos is still alive and is giving out orders. This event in the plot caused the entire player base to collectively reach for the nearest source of alcohol and try to pretend that this is not happening. Well, an Ashian has possessed Zenos' body. But you get to see the prisoners reunited with everyone in the end, and that's really the end of Stormblood, with a cliffhanger. The rest of this is pretty much just set up for Shadowbringers. So with all of this, Stormblood is a bit weird. It's honestly hard to say what's wrong with the story without me going on a massive tangent. So let me put on a diaper so I don't completely shit on it. I don't think the general idea for the story is bad. There are actually some decent stories and characters in here that are likable. I even think that the Yotsuyu arc is surprisingly good even when compared to everything in the game, all expansions included. It has its moments, and if you're not paying close attention, it's actually pretty fine in those moments, even if it's just people talking about what to do for hours on end. However, I cannot contain my shit forever. I mean, fight a war on two fronts, you say. Well, that's kind of weird because what you did was fight two wars on one front. Yes, 1 + 1 = 2, but that's not exactly how wars are fought. Also, the fact that the distance between the Far East and Alamigo only matters when it needs to for the plot is a bit frustrating. The Domans can help attack Alamigo, but information doesn't travel fast enough to let this group know that Doma is free. Right, because moving an entire army is much quicker than delivering a simple message. But then there's even things like the results of efforts not being clear enough. For example, it doesn't really show that freeing the Far East helped with the war that we started with. I mean, fuck. Even if they just said that they wanted to liberate the East and go get another army to fight Alamigo, it would have made sense. Overall, many things are not executed super well, and there are just so many things that stand out. I would not say that the story is bad, because it's actually very okay. I think Stormblood could have been great if they put a little bit more development into some characters and made the overall narrative feel much more cohesive. There are definitely ways that they could have done that, but they didn't. The reality these days is that it was a step down in terms of story from the expansions it's currently sandwiched between. At the same time, damn did it have some good gameplay content and some kick-ass music. Even the side stories are kick-ass. It's really just the MSQ story that's not that great. Heck, the area maps are awe-inspiring, and Kugane is an awesome city. But the saddest thing to consider is that after this expansion and the community's general displeasure towards it, along with the praise for Shadowbringers, it would not be a surprise to me if this was the catalyst that made it so that the story was by far the biggest focus for the game moving forward, because despite most players generally liking the gameplay, it is ultimately not what the majority of players care about. I won't end this by being overly negative. Like I said, I think parts of the story are still good. It's just a lack of cohesion between parts that makes it all seem worse in the greater context, along with some character development that leaves more to be desired, and some weird plot holes. For me, though, I think Stormblood is okay overall. It could have been better, but it's not like it was an awful expansion. Games should be viewed more in terms of everything they bring to the table, not just one aspect. Although I do see how the story's aftertaste could make everything else seem much worse. You might hear that Stormblood is only better than A Realm Reborn, and while that might be true, it is still way better than A Realm Reborn. And to be clear, it's not like everyone dislikes this story. Now let's get out there and listen to some Triumph.